is the ability to change. And that would make Joe Mcnally the smartest photographer alive. Joe's career spans almost 40 years and has seen him as a full-time copy boy at the New York Daily News, a freelance news photographer, the last staff photographer in the history of Life magazine, a successful advertising and commercial photographer, a regular contributor to National Geographic, including the very first digital shoot for the magazine in 2003. And he also shipped 47 cases of equipment to Chile to shoot giant telescopes. He is listed as one of the 100 most important people in photography and described by the magazine as perhaps the most versatile photojournalist working today. And I could go on. His project, The Faces of Ground Zero, Giant Polaroid, a collection of 246 giant portraits, is perhaps the most significant artistic response to and documentation of the tragedy of the World Trade Center in New York. According to Joe, being a photographer is like walking on a tightrope. Sometimes you need to push yourself to perform and to get the work done, and at other times, the trepidation of failure can be a powerful motivator. A true master of photography and a personal hero of mine, please welcome Joe Mcnally.
Okay, all right, thank you. How you doing? Everybody okay? Thank you. That's the first thing to say, really. Thank you to His Highness, Your Excellencies. Thank you to all the folks here in Sharjah, the talents and skills of everyone who is combined here, the staff at Xposure. This is a massive undertaking, and it's coming off in amazing fashion. So my thanks go out to everyone, and my thanks go out to you for coming and spending a little time looking at some photographs. That's one of the things that I've noticed here that's very powerful is the warm welcome and the tremendous amount of respect for photography that's been afforded to all the incoming photographers. And speaking of the incoming photographers, I'm very humbled to be here. It's an amazing to be included. I'm going to talk to you today about being on assignment. I'm walking in the midst of a group of photographers who are truly astonishing in terms of their skill level, their passion, and the way that skill set is coalesced around certain kinds of bodies of work. I cite the work of, for instance, of Amy Vitale or Stephen Wilkes. You know, they have directed their considerable efforts and passion in a very palpable way to isolate and identify for us all certain areas of concern. That's not me. I grew up as a newspaper wire service photographer. It was not uncommon for me to shoot 5 assignments in a day. My career has sort of proceeded from there in kind of sort of the same fashion. The ongoing thread that might connect my work is that I love photography. I'm still in love with the sound of the shutter all these years later. I became a professional photographer in 1978. So if anybody wants to do the math, please don't stop it right now. Okay, so 41 years on, that's a lot of pictures under the bridge there for sure. And I've bounced all over the place. I'm a very curious person. And if you assign me to something and tell me to get curious about it and approach it with a camera, I'm there. I'm interested. I'll do it. Okay, so there's no real kind of thematic connection in my work other than the fact that I love to do this. So I'll show you a few things. I love coming here to this area. Sharjah has been an amazing experience. I visited this area quite often, actually over time. I'm from New York, as you might see, but I'm going to talk to you a little bit about notions. Photographers, we have notions, right? We have flights of fancy, imagination, curiosity, etc. We say, as photographers, what if a great deal of the time? And that is the essence of who we are. So I kind of said at one point, I said, you know, what if I could climb the Burj Khalifa? I had climbed numerous towers around the world, and I finally, after 3 years of talking with the building, they finally let me get up here. And I made this picture. I made this picture on a smartphone, you know? And it became, by the time I released it at the top of the building, by the time I hit the sidewalk, it had become the most viewed picture I'd ever shot in my entire career, which was mildly disappointing, actually, because I really worked hard on other pictures. But it convinced me of a certain sea change that was occurring in our industry, the nexus of social media and the awareness of photography through this digital system that is encircling us right now. I wasn't satisfied just with that. I went back to the Burj Khalifa, I got some training, and there's a short video here. You can't really photograph something you're standing on, so I had to keep punting myself off the building as we went down with the window washers. It was definitely a fun thing to do. I felt for the gentleman next to me. He kept talking to me. He was from Nepal. There we go. And I couldn't really understand what he was saying, but he was busy washing the window, and there was this overlarge American who kept punting off the building and banging back into the window. So I imagine something that he might have been saying to me was like, dude, I just washed that window, and now I have to do it over. I did it for free. Did all this because I wanted to, okay? But again, the power of social media, the Echo Shoe Company saw the picture of my shoes on top of the Khalifa, and they contacted me on Facebook, and they said, dude, it looks like you could use a new pair of boots. So they sent me a new pair of size 11s, and I'm a freelance photographer, so working for shoes is fine by me. But it was a notion many years ago I had. It was back in the 70s in New York, and I walked out. You could do this back then. I walked up on the Queensboro Bridge, and I said to these guys who were painting it, I said, I'm supposed to go up with you and work at the New York Daily News. They said, sure, come on up. Simple, right? I climbed the tower on the trade centers. I shot this for the National Geographic on a story called The Power of Light. What do we do as photographers? We try to take the stories we're assigned to and make them relatable to the reader. It's a very audacious thing to do, to be a photographer. In this era of cell phones and smartphones, etc., photography can seem to be a little facile, right? Which is fine, it's great. Selfies, take pictures of your family, take a picture of what you had for breakfast, it's all good. Okay, but if you're going to pitch a tent at a certain level photographically, this is a very difficult thing to do, because you are having this kind of amazing, kind of revelatory experience, an emotional experience, a visceral experience, and you're watching that, looking at it, interpreting it, and you have to translate it through all this machinery, lenses, plastic wiring, algorithms, all that, and then punt it out into the world and hope somebody notices. I always tell young photographers when I teach, what you're trying to do with the best of your pictures is prompt a conversation with someone that you'll never meet. Get them to stop, get them to think, get them to notice, roil their sleep, make them laugh, make them sit up and pay attention. So, hence, the power of light, I thought, well, everybody's changed the light bulb. That's a relatable experience. So let's find a famous light bulb at the top of the Empire State Building. And when I conceived of this, I thought, well, what could go wrong? Plenty, as it turned out. I took 4 climbs to manage to get this photograph. But then I developed a relationship with the Empire State Building, and I climbed it many times. And then finally, again, the power of social media, circling back, I actually really got paid to do a climb, okay? The Epson company wanted to do an advertising series, and they called me up and said, we're going to put a notion out on social media of what our next ad campaign should be, and people are going to send in their ideas, and then you'll go shoot it. I was like, fine, that sounds good. And of course somebody sent a notion in about having you go climb something, hence I'm on another tower in Boston, the Prudential Building up in Boston. Notions. This was self-assigned. Nobody asked me to go do this, but I'm interested in mining. I've gone into mines all over the world. So I found this small town, and I set up a studio, and I photographed the men on the shift as they went into and came out of the mine. Spent a couple days, didn't ask them for a release, made sure they got prints, and on the second day, they kind of came around and said, okay, you want to go into the mine? And I said, sure. It's not an easy mine to work. It's 7,500 feet deep. It's a narrow seam mine. You can't even stand up when you're down there. And I'm going back in November. I don't know where this will go. Nobody has asked me to do it, but photographers, we have notions. I started photographing dance a long time ago. This is 1978. It's the first, I don't know, reasonably successful dance picture I ever shot. By happenstance, my apartment that I moved to, my second apartment in New York City, was a block away from Lincoln Center. I started seeing all these dancers going in for their workouts, and I got to know a few of them, and I volunteered to start shooting their workouts, which was wonderful. I always tell young photographers, again, during the course of this very difficult sort of highs and lows of your career, try to find something that you find so beautiful that you can't help but shoot it. And for me, that's been dance, and it started a long time ago. Now, I'll be the first one to admit, I was young, I was single, and the motivation to meet ballerinas was not purely photographic. I admit that. But it started a lifelong love affair with dance that matured and became part of my archive over time. Juliet from the New York City Ballet, the Ballet National of Cuba, the Bolshoi in Russia. Anybody think the life of a photographer is glamorous? I was on assignment for Life magazine, a multi-billion-dollar company, and they said, you can go shoot the Bolshoi, just don't spend any money. So this is where I stayed, in my fixer's tenement in downtown Moscow. A glamorous life indeed. The feat of Paloma Herrera, the beauty of dance is closely aligned with pain. And oddly enough, Julie Kent and Marcelo Gomez, two of the premier dancers of our times, shot through the American Ballet Theater and dropped as a 40-foot banner in Lincoln Center, about a block away from where I used to live, some 30 years later. The life of a photographer is oftentimes circular. You have to be careful of what you do and take care of the things that you are approaching photographically, because things come around in a photographic career, for sure. This is a dance picture I made here, just outside the city, in the desert. I made this picture here as well. I shoot fashion. I'm not a fashion photographer. I mean, look at me. This is not a fashion photographer, right? But I find the beauty, color, and light of the fashion world very intriguing for my imagination. So I shoot fashion. One of my clients for many years was the city of Beijing. I worked for the Beijing Cultural Commission, and they afforded me many opportunities, one of which was to work with historically important Chinese designers in gowns up on the Great Wall in Peru. And a little homage to Bob Fosse and jazz and being a Broadway hoofer, as they say. I photograph music, but I don't lay claim to being a music photographer. No, it's not a specialty, but I love music. I love the imagination of music. I love the people and the quirkiness of the people who are quintessentially excellent musicians. The Paris Blues Club in New York. Leonard Bernstein at the piano on the occasion of his 75th birthday. Lenny was well and truly a genius. I photographed him many times. He was difficult. He was a volcano of a man. But he was worth the effort to be around. Tony Bennett in a coffee shop in Queens. You think, like, he's a celebrity. What is he doing in this coffee shop in Queens? I asked him to come with me. Why? Because Tony grew up in Astoria. So as a photographer, what we're trying to do is tell stories. That's the Queensboro Bridge in the distance. He came from very humble beginnings in Queens, and that Queensboro Bridge was his highway to the city lights and Broadway and stardom. The largest gathering of jazz musicians ever done in one place, Silver Cup Studios in New York. Wynton Marsalis and down in the Cathedral in New Orleans. Tammy Wynette. Anybody country music fan? Stand By Your Man. And that's me and Tammy reflected in the mirror. This is circa 1980. I'm complete. I've got the porn star mustache and the style of the day going on, all that sort of stuff. I have flights of fancy. I live well in the realm of my imagination. All photographers do. Nikon came to me and asked me to come up with something for the launch of their mirrorless cameras, and I conceived of an alien visitation to a diner, but it wasn't an all-powerful alien. I conceived of an elderly alien couple that might be there having scrambled eggs at your local diner. This was a scouting picture shot on a smartphone. And you have to get intrigued, right? I had been assigned, the big photo convention in New York asked me to create a series of kind of spooky, fantastical posters for them because it was going to be held on Halloween weekend. And so we were scouting this location and I saw the highlights going up. The sun doesn't go up, it goes down. I looked out the window and there was a pool out there reflecting the sun up into that window. So several days later, production and whatnot, got the room set up, a muralist painted the walls, recreated that pool light outside, and came up with this. Little girl reading a scary story at night when she should have been asleep, and there's an evil elf materializing out of her wall, and Lord knows what's about to happen to her. That's a big production. But here's the thing, I bounce all over the lot. It's not necessary for me to have a big production or a big budget or anything like that. I have a friend, he's a photo editor at a place called the American Association for the Advancement of Science, which is just as boring as that sounds, okay? And they had this idea that they wanted to illustrate on the cover of research, etc., that involved mice. I set up a studio in my garage, out in my driveway, as you just saw. There was no budget. And we shot this. Here's the dismaying thing about being an editorial photographer. The mouse made more money than I did. True. We had to have 2 mice, in case one of the little darlings got tuckered out. We had to have a mouse wrangler, okay? And I'm at the camera, and I'm going, Gucci, hello, sweetie. And I looked at my assistant, and I said, it's come to this. I'm trying to get a mouse to smile. I've shot a lot of medical and science stuff, but I'm not a medical photographer. I'm curious about it. I'm intensely fascinated by the amazing things they can do in the realm of science and medicine. This was an astonishing moment for me. I am 2 feet away from the living human brain. This young girl, Jody Miller, 3 years old, undergoing a procedure called a hemispherectomy. Radical procedure. Half her brain was removed. An entire hemisphere was removed. The family allowed me to spend time with them some months leading up to the surgery. Jody could have easily died that day. When a family lets you in as a photographer to that inner circle of emotions, it's a debt you can never completely repay. And so I'm staying in touch. One of the things I think photographers need to kind of grapple with or establish is a sense of constancy. So I'm still in touch with the family. I'm friends with Jody on Facebook. She's had a pretty normal life. She's a teacher, she's married, and we stay in touch. It's one of the things you can do as something to give back to the people that you encounter with a camera, is to be constant, to be in touch, to be the good shepherd of the images that you create in the aftermath of the photographic encounter. I spent a lot of time in the air, but I'm not an aviation photographer. This was just fun, playing around in the air. I shot aviation, actually, for the National Geographic. This is Up and Over with the Blue Angels. This is, as pilots will tell you, it presents a dynamic environment for the taking of photos, sir. They always put a formal spin on these things. And that was the cover of that particular issue. Aiden graciously mentioned it earlier. It was an amazing story to have engaged in, and I always enjoy any opportunity I have to photograph aviation, though it's hardly a specialty. And there is actually a whole grouping of photographers for whom aviation is everything. They concentrate on it, they photograph it all the time. as I say, a science photographer, or certainly a night sky photographer. But Geographic assigned me to go and photograph telescopes. I've had I'll call it a fractious relationship with the National Geographic. Most of the wounds are self-inflicted, I freely admit that. But I always thought, you can tell exactly how mad a magazine is at you if they send you to go shoot telescopes. Large buildings on the tops of lonely, cold, dark mountains in remote places on Earth. And this, of course, is just a personal assessment on my part, but astronomers, to me, are by and large, as a group, joyless. But that's just a personal observation. Yeah, so, here I am on the top of Mauna Kea at 13,500 feet, photographing one of the world's premier telescopes. Also Mauna Kea. You go do some nutty stuff, okay, to get this kind of work done. This is a 175-foot boom crane that I had outfitted with cameras and lights. You get a healthy tolerance, or a healthy respect, I should say, for the wind when you're on top of an 11,500-foot mountain, on top of a 175-foot toothpick, waving around in the wind. I've got about 35,000 watt-seconds of flash inside this facility. It's the world's largest binocular telescope. Geographic ran it, they liked it, it was fine, everything was done, I look around, I said, oh, gosh, wow, nobody's ever gonna do that again. Nobody's ever gonna be stupid enough to try to get a 175-foot boom crane truck up 120 switchbacks on the top of a mountain and shoot this. Okay, but it's over now, I don't necessarily care about this picture anymore. That's one thing about photographers, I think we have to go forward all the time. You might be guessing a little bit now from my presentations that I'm somewhat irreverent about my work. I care deeply about it. Once I shoot it, it's done. What's the next thing? What's the next thing? I'm not a pictorialist. In fact, I'll freely admit to the entire assembly here, God, I'm an awful landscape photographer. I'm just not good at it at all. I need something to feed back to me. The rocks and the trees, I respect landscape photography, but good Lord, I need somebody to talk back. But I've shot, as I say, I'm not a pictorialist, but I've shot some pretty pictures over time. There's a story on cutting horses out in Texas for Sports Illustrated. My friend Nancy. I shoot sports, but I'm not a sports photographer, not by any stretch of the imagination. If you see hardcore sports photographers out there, that group really knows what they're doing. I've dabbled in sports. I had a contract with Sports Illustrated for a number of years until they actually really did discover that I didn't know how to shoot sports, and they took it away. It worked out for a while. Bruce Dalrymple, basketball player. This is 125th Street subway station in New York City. Shawn Johnson, at that point, the best gymnast in the world. Here's the thing, that has to go through the calculus in your head to make an arresting photograph. This ran as the lead to the Sports Illustrated Anthology of the Year in Sports Pictures that year. Shawn had an amazing year, okay? Her specialty is the balance beam. She's from Iowa. What do they do in Iowa? They grow corn. Put the balance beam in the cornfield. This is not rocket science, okay? I show this picture now occasionally, and there are some photographers, who come to me or look at it and say, wow, that's a fantastic composite. No, it's one piece of film done a long time ago in an airport hangar in Lubbock, Texas. I got the entire United States trampolining team in one spot on the day of the shoot. So I had to prep all this beforehand, so I went and got balloons. I talked to the coach. I said, how high did they get? And they said, well, about 12, 15 feet. So the lady at the balloon and flower shop loved me, because every day I was going in and ordering all these helium balloons and putting them up at a height that I could light them. The close of the Hawaiian Ironman triathlon. And then Rio, the Olympics. I negotiated with Sports Illustrated for about a year, and they wanted me to go do, quote unquote, a portrait of Rio. I was like, I'm cool with that. This is the life of a magazine photographer. The editor I worked all that out with got fired right before the Olympics. So I was starting this, and the editors in New York were seeing these images and saying, excuse me, that's not Michael Phelps. Send him back to the sports. So that was that. Okay, my little feature on Rio went by the boards. I hadn't shot hardcore sports in a long time, but it's kind of like riding a bicycle. It comes back to you, you know? So I went back to shooting sports. And, you know, John said last night in his amazing presentation, I mean, the work that he showed last night, and he did mention over the course of time that technology has assisted us as photographers to increase our level of hits relative to misses. So certainly the technology that's afforded to the photographer has enabled and enlarged the possibilities of sports photography. For instance, this. I mean, I did this off-the-cuff handheld at the side of the fencing. I just programmed in a multiple exposure. And there you have it. This is surprising, let's put it that way. I'm not a Vegas photographer. I do a lot of shooting down in Vegas. I'm familiar with the community down there, and I work with a lot of Cirque du Soleil athletes and dancers. And here's the thing, you have to think proactively to create your own future nowadays as a photographer. I have a good relationship with Nikon, and a while back they had an ad campaign that said, I am this, you know, I am imagination, I am Nikon. So I sent them in a proposal and I said, I am endlessly reflected. And they gave me some funding to create a set made entirely of mirrors on the outskirts of Vegas, which was a fun thing to do. I don't know if anybody here has been to Nevada, but people just do this on the highways. You see them, you drive by them, they're just out there. My friend Jolie is a dancer. I've been to some very stressed areas of the earth, but I'm by no means a conflict photographer. I wouldn't own up to that at all. I'm not any good at it. But as a photographer, you bounce around enough, and I actually left these in honor of Frankie. That was a wonderful presentation. I don't know if he's still here, but very heartfelt and stemming from his childhood and reflecting who he is as a human being. And this was the morning of Bobby Sands' death on the Falls Road in Belfast, and that's his funeral. Frank referenced that a little bit in the course of his talk. This is Grozny. This is Rwanda after the genocide. Portraits. I could own up to being a portrait photographer. I'm endlessly fascinated with the human face. I am driven by faces. I find myself staring at people. People kind of maybe look at me oddly. I'm like, I wonder how I would like that face. I wonder, that's an interesting face, etc. This is my friend Donald, who has since passed on. Okay? Fiona Apple. Okay? She wanted to be a warrior woman. She wanted a suit of armor. I got her a suit of armor. The shoot ran long. Her manager said, we have to take the subway to get back to the bus in time. I looked at her and I said, why don't you get on the subway with the armor? And after the studio shoot, it was an elaborate thing that we did. That all went by the boards, and I shot this flash on camera on the New York City subway in rush hour, and that's the picture the magazine used. Michelle Pfeiffer with the Hope Diamond. Pat Patterson's original Marlboro Man. Bo Jackson, amazing athlete. Gail Devers, at this point in time, the fastest woman in the world. An obstacle course runner. I love the face. I love the human face. So I guess when you look at this grab bag, basically I'm an assignment guy. You know, you point in a certain direction, I'll go get a photograph for you. Okay? This is the Masters. Anybody a golf fan? This is the holy cathedral of golf, Augusta, Georgia. The Golf Digest folks assigned me to this because I don't like golf. Okay, I respect it. I admire people who are good at it, but I don't really understand it. I'm one of those folks who might describe golf as a pleasant walk, interrupted. But they set me down because they wanted to do a story about Augusta and its pristine quality, and the fact of it being in a city that is a pretty tough city. For instance, this is the pristine golf courses of Augusta National. They'd rather you not know that this is right at their doorstep. You see those trees up there? That's the golf course. They'd rather you not focus on this. It's just a hardscrabble little town in America off the interstate. Okay? Rudy Johnson. This is the life of a photographer. The magazine desperately wanted me to shoot this guy. He was the chairman. The Masters came back and said, we'll only allow you to shoot this if a photographer donates all of his images to the Masters. So here I am as a freelance photographer in a position where I'm donating my pictures to one of the wealthiest organizations on the planet. But the tribes of the faithful go forward at Augusta. Tradition reigns. hand-adjusted scoreboards, all of that. But it is in a town where there's some really, really kind of real-life stuff going on. These are the caddies. They were disenfranchised by Augusta, and they lost their biggest payday. They're the local caddies. They no longer can work the Masters because all the high-powered golfers bring in their own people. This minister, I walked into his church. I just love this man. Look at the size of his hands. I would not want to be a sinner in this man's congregation. And Augusta's favorite son, James Brown. Okay, James came in, and he was dressed like this. I was desperately setting up things. I was working by myself, and I turned around, I saw him there, and he goes, "Hi, I'm James Brown." And I was like, I know. You know, and people sometimes look at me and say, "What about that leg?" You know, we shot this in a lobby, an elevator lobby of a building in Augusta, Georgia. I could get rid of it. I don't. It's there. It's fine. It's okay. I leave it alone. And a quick window into a signing. I shot this not too long ago for ESPN, the magazine, which is no longer existing. Things move fast in this day and age of ours. These 4 young ladies were part of a team that won 100 games in a row. College basketball. Lovely young kids. Very talented. Love these young ladies. I'm working in the practice gym here. Here's a quick hit on an assignment day, okay? I have an hour with these young women, okay? And so I'm setting all this up, moving it around. That's my first picture, okay? Strong, confident, all that sort of stuff. Okay, there I am trying to direct them. Okay, and I get them to be fierce, looking at me in the camera. The magazine called me up when they saw this picture and said, "We really like this angle. Did you do anything where they were pleasant looking?" And I was like, no. So I screwed up, right? I should have taken a minute, but I was moving so fast, I didn't. Good Lord. You'd think you'd learn after a while. Okay, setting up on a ladder. Of course, ESPN has a film crew with you as well. Okay, shooting an above angle, and shooting this, which is the picture that ultimately ran. So here's the calculus, right? ESPN, the magazine, paid me $650 to shoot this. Okay, I had 2 assistants who they didn't pay completely their rates. I had another person doing social media. They didn't pay for her at all. Okay, I looked around the gym because I had to have stations for all these people, moving them around on it. I realized I probably had $50,000, $60,000 worth of gear sprayed over the gym floor. Then, of course, I took the crew to dinner. You have to take care of the people who work so hard for you. And so my net from this day, was about negative $400. Okay? But I forgive them everything because ESPN is owned by the Walt Disney Corporation, and as we know, Walt Disney is just, it's a struggling mom and pop business, so I'm happy to pitch in. And you have to have fun. You have to have fun when you do this. This is so hard to do sometimes. I really, you have to love it. You have to have so much fun doing this and just go through brick wall after brick wall after brick wall. Because what fuels you is the desire for photographs. And trust me, there's a whole array of people out there who are more than willing to say no. And you have to drive through that. This, I thought I was in Nirvana, right? I ended up with an assignment to shoot for the oil fields out there, and it was going to be a fantastic assignment. I spent 1 day out there, and then I got a 2-line email from the CEO of the company. He didn't even go to his computer, he just sent it to me from his iPhone, and the project was over. That was it, okay? I was supposed to shoot 30 days, I shot 1. Things happen. The days of magazines like Geographic, pushing out stories that really allow the photographers to ramble around, those are hard to come by nowadays. This is the first major cover story I did for National Geographic. They put me on assignment for 6 months. 6 months? I came out of New York City. I've been shooting for Sports Illustrated, where 5 days was a big job, you know? 6 months? Okay, I was all over the world documenting sight, the problems that occur, the solutions, okay, the desperate nature of what happens when we lose this incredibly important sense. This young lady was shot in the head twice. This is now how she has to see a horse. The emotions of the eye. Seeing eye dogs, what they do. What's the first thing you lose in a tear gas attack? Your eyesight. And a little girl who had just had her eyes repaired, looking out the hospital window the morning after her surgery, seeing the world for the first time with repaired eyes. Docklands, this is my first international story for the Geographic. They put me over in London for 17 weeks. Good Lord, that was amazing. Okay, it was a neighborhood story, a neighborhood in flux. Canary Wharf going up in the middle of this neighborhood where previous to that, your average building was 2 stories high. Londoners were angry. East Enders were angry. Folks like this, neighborhood folks, in a pub, gambling, which is illegal, okay? Down-home folks were being pushed out by folks with means. Folks were buying up waterfront property. Whole industries were disappearing, like spice grinding. People who had lived there their whole lives didn't know what to make of it. This is actually my favorite wedding picture I have ever shot. I haven't done too many weddings, but I just have always loved this picture. Driving new tunnels under London to service the railways that are connecting Docklands with main downtown London. And somebody like George Meacher got displaced from his apartment. This is his new place. It was physically better than the old place. But as you can maybe see in this photograph, he was lost. He didn't want to move. The place that he had been in his whole life, that was home. So I'll leave you with this thought, okay? This is my friend Keith. I've been very involved with FDNY for quite a number of years. And the best thing about being a photographer in this business is not so much the pictures, it's not so much the challenge. I mean, there's all of that. It's the people you meet, the people you honor with your camera, the relationships you develop, the strength that you bring into the field, that you bring to bear to tell their story. That's who you are, that's what you need to be. So just a quick thing here, last couple of images. I photographed Keith 18 years ago. And you think sometimes, you know, make pictures and you move on. Well, 10 years later, that's his wonderful daughter, Danny, sitting on his shoulder in Chinatown, New York. We stayed in touch all these years. We've become good friends. And then his daughters called up my wife and I and said, we're giving a 60th birthday surprise party for my father. Ended up on Staten Island that night, line dancing with a whole bunch of photographers. That's the reward of this business. So I don't know where this is going to lead. The path ahead is uncertain. I have no idea what I'm going to do, I don't know, next years for sure. You know, that's one thing about this field. You have to be comfortable with uncertainty. But I can tell you this, if somebody gives me a good assignment and tells me to go get him a picture, I'll regard that opportunity with a great deal of enthusiasm. Thank you very much.